Welcome everyone back. In cybersecurity, we always talk about threats and how to detect those things that we do know. But what about those things that we don't know, zero-day exploits, etc., etc.? David Gray is going to talk to us all about it and whether we should change our mindset into always looking to those things that we don't know. I hope you enjoyed the talk, Cybersecurity Survivorship Bias, Avoiding It, and Where to Put Your Armour. Enjoy.
Morning all, welcome to this and the next series of talks at CRESTCon, and obviously on the incident response line. Myself, I'm David Gray. I'm one of the directors at Entity Security here in the UK. I've got a couple of roles here, so I lead our digital forensics incident response and also some of our bespoke consulting elements. Just a little bit more about my background, because it probably relates to why I'm talking about what I'm talking about today and gives you a bit more of an understanding of my experience and where I come from. So I started my career in the military, in the Air Force, moved on through various defense organizations, defense contractors, and also into the consulting environment where I was doing implementation work for SOCs, so build, design, and run all around the world. So everything from oil and gas to banking, from the Middle East to Canary Wharf. So this talk really is just to give you a bit of my insight to survivorship bias. So obviously very pleased to be here, very pleased to be part of the CREST session. Entity is one of the actual vendors that's supporting this event, and also really proud to be an actual CREST team leader myself for our incident response teams. So that's enough about me. Let's get on to the actual subject we're here for today. So survivorship bias. We want to start off by dealing with a lesson from history to actually explain what survivorship bias is. This kind of originates out from a blog post I wrote a couple of months back that you can find on InfoSec magazine on their website if you're interested in it, or find this, you want to get some more information on this. Right, so this is all from World War II. Around about halfway through World War II, the Allies were obviously concerned about their aircraft getting shot down. So they conducted a review of all the actual battle damage that was occurring to the aircraft. And that was carried out by the Statistical Research Group in Columbia University in the United States. So here's the question. You don't want your aircraft to get shot down by enemy fighters, so you want to armor them. But armor actually makes the aircraft themselves heavier. So heavier planes, they're less maneuverable, they use more fuel. So you want to use as little as possible and in the most optimal places that you can do so. So the military came up with what you see here, all these red dots on the actual the aircraft, where they thought that was going to be the most effective. And this was where they were initially planning on doing all of the actual armoring on the aircraft. But that's without all of the information. So, you know, we're going to add all this armor, but what actually happened to the aircraft that didn't come back? So there was a gentleman called Abraham Wald. He had a different viewpoint on this from all the scientists that were actually working on the problem. He had a different background. His was more a mathematical one rather than the actual science that the engineers were working on. And his perspective was to ask, where are all those missing bullet holes that are actually in the what we're seeing? you know, all the aircraft that were coming back, they had the hits all across the fuselage themselves. So, you know, it's obviously plain to see that the aircraft can actually sustain that kind of damage, but can actually make it back to the airfield. Those that aren't actually surviving are the ones that are getting hit in either the engines or where the pilots themselves are. So ultimately, that is where we want the bullets. So we want the armor to go. So when we're talking about survivorship bias, it's where we are taking the wrong viewpoint because we don't have all the information that we should be looking at. The very same gentleman had a similar observation with the US Army. They had designed a new helmet towards the end of World War II, and they were concerned because there was lots more soldiers that were coming into the hospitals with head wounds. That it was obviously a concern to the generals because they perceived that their staff were being injured because of these helmets, but it was actually the other way around. Once more, these soldiers were actually surviving. The ones that had passed away were on they were never actually a statistic as far as the hospitals were concerned. Right, so that's the history lesson over and done with. Let's focus in on what that means for us. So in reality, known bad, that is our bias as we concern it for cybersecurity. Everything we do has got bias. We look for known bad, we write signatures to detect known bad, and we then respond to those threats. Right? So from experience, we know that threat actors, they live off the land nowadays. They use the tools that are already built into Windows or any of the other tool sets that sysadmins have got availability to. A good example of that is Bits Admin. That's a Windows admin tool that's, command line tool that issues out running jobs, and it's probably one of the main tools that threat actors are using these days to be able to spread and do lateral movement and run tasks across the systems that they are trying to expose. Another way to look at this, taking another World War II quote, is from George Patton himself. Fixed formations are a monument to the stupidity of man. So what I'm saying by that is, if we think about the Siegfried line, that was something that the French built after World War I to stop any further incursions from Germany, and basically to act as a massive defense. And for that simile, that's all of our frontline tools. And in our simile here, what did Hitler do? Just went through Belgium and invaded France, and all the rest is history. So again, coming back to what we want to do, we want to constantly be pivoting, looking at our environments and being able to see where we can make improvements to be able to stay ahead of the threats, or at the very least up to date with the threats that we're facing, so that we aren't ultimately losing. Obviously, these are just some of the many tools that detect known bad at the moment. You should all be more than familiar with these. They're all detecting the threats that we face, and the threats that we face are changing year by year. The threat that everybody's coming across at the moment is obviously ransomware, but ultimately that is going to be mitigated at some point in time in the future, and we're going to move on to the next latest and greatest threats. I mean, we all remember things like Code Red, the I Love You virus, all of those things, WannaCry, things like that. So let's move forward from there. We'll have a look at some of these in turn. So the first one, antivirus definitions, probably the oldest of all the safety tools we've got out there. But we all know that threat actors, they're going to test the malware against every single antivirus platform out there to see if it's going to trigger. That's what they do. It's just standard practice now, and it has been for at least 10 or 15 years. Malware itself, again, this has been going for years now. Malware is not static, it's constantly changing. Polymorphic malware, there's no one single signature that is going to detect it. It's all heuristic detection nowadays that is looking for this. It's standard. Antivirus is standard. We treat it as if we'd have brakes on a car. It's just normal now. To a certain extent, we've got the same issue with threat intelligence feeds. It's not just us that are using it, it's also threat actors themselves. So if any of their attacks are going to appear into somebody's threat intelligence feeds, they're just going to change their tools, their techniques, what they're doing to make sure that they're able to get into your networks and not get flagged up when they do so. Same sort of thing we're getting with the next generation of antivirus as well. Let's start thinking about custom threat feeds, making sure that your AV tools, that you're doing things slightly different from out of the box. Next, we're going to come on to use case signatures. I've spent a lot of my career over the years working on use cases, building, delivering them all around the world for different verticals. Anything that you get out of the box is ultimately, it's just going to pick up known bad. Really, to make them effective, you have to be able to customize them to something more usable for yourselves as well. So start thinking about custom detection capabilities and make sure that you tie them into your incident response runbooks and your procedures. So it's all well and good detecting something, but you need to know what you're going to do when you've actually got it and make sure that that enables you to speed up your response time. I'm not going to labor too much on use cases at the moment because this is the known content. We'll come back to use cases later on in this talk. All right, one more final bit on known bad. There's a ton of known bad out there. We just need to know which perspective of the known bad that we're going to be worried about and what focus we have for it. So, you know, using all these images we've got here, you know, Sarah Connor herself, she's only really going to be interested in the Terminator or Batman with the Joker. We as industries, we need to think about what the actual threats themselves are and which ones we specifically need to be interested in. And everything else, we just make sure that the baseline tools are actually picking up everything else. We focus in specifically on what we are interested in for our businesses. So moving on. This one in particular, this is a quote from Donald Rumsfeld back at the time of the Gulf War. So he gave this in 2002. This would have been the second Gulf War. And he was talking about the lack of information that the US government had at the time with dealing with the terror threat as it was perceived at the time from Iraq. So lots of knowns, unknowns. What does that mean for us? So let's delve in a little bit deeper. So we're going to move away from known. Right. So these are our facts. These are our signatures, our antivirus, our use cases. Right. We'll park those for 1 minute. The rest of this presentation, we're going to start looking at the other things that we don't necessarily know and how we can actually look to pick those up. So things we know we don't know are ultimately, you know, have we been compromised? The next ones we don't know, we know, our intuition, what am I missing? And then these are the ones that give us that itch, you know, have I actually been compromised, and how could I establish that was the case? So as an industry, this is what we need to focus on, these three boxes. We're confident that signature-based is going to do that known bad bit of the business. As long as we obviously make sure that everything's still working, we have to focus on the next boxes to be able to make improvements across the board. So how are we going to actually do that? How are we going to improve the way that we as professionals work and our security operations centres work? So first of all, we're going to change the actual mentality that we have as teams. So blue sky thinking, thinking outside the box, those are things that we always hear people talking about when use cases and things like that come up, when they're just trying to think of some way of designing or thinking of a new use case or signature to be able to actually detect threats. So we just need to figure out the best way of doing that. From my perspective, I spent a lot of the time in the military worrying that there was things that I was missing. You know, we were dealing with threats almost every single day. I was getting phone calls at 2 o'clock in the morning when I was on call and responding to new alerts that were coming in that I, as a malware analyst at the time, had to go and take to pieces and analyze. And ultimately, cybersecurity is a cat and mouse game. We are dealing with new threats that are coming in, and we as defenders are constantly playing catch up. So it's that change in mentality that we have to have. So what we should be flipping over to is these sort of things. Have I been compromised? What it is that I'm missing? And ultimately, what attacks got through that I don't know about? So if we actually start thinking from the very beginning that, you know, we believe we've already been compromised, and we are going to actively search to find where we've been compromised, it's a change in focus, and it's a change in mindset that allows us to start looking at our environments in a different sort of way. And this is one of the ways we can do it. So I read this book about 3 or 4 years ago. It's a leadership book, but it's almost as if it's been written for us in cybersecurity. The Medici effect, it's where teams with no or little related experiences collaborate together on some kind of problem, and because they have different perspectives on the problem, it enables them as a team to actually work to be able to resolve it in new and innovative ways, different approaches and different tactics to be able to solve that. So how does it actually work? So first of all, you take a team that has a certain skill set and you bring in another team completely unrelated to them. And that bit in the middle, where these two teams actually work, that is where the magic happens. Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple of examples. First of all, from the real world, and then I'll focus over into us in the cyberspace. So this particular scenario is from around about 5 or 6 years ago now, from our own NHS. This scenario comes back to where, and this is obviously long before COVID and everything we have nowadays, but was dealing with NHS staff having to get the patients when they were coming into the emergency operation room through to the operations room itself, and to get the surgeons working on the patient to see about saving their life as rapidly as possible. They had delays, and they were trying to figure out how they can actually speed up the process. So the people they actually reached out to were obviously McLaren Formula One. It's as random and as genius as you can think of it. They actually worked with the pit crew for the McLaren team to understand how a different team uses processes and procedures and teamwork to be able to do handoffs between individual parts of the team to speed up the entire process. And that's something that made a dramatic increase to the effectiveness of the speed that these patients were being seen. So that's just one example, but what does that mean for us? So let's take your traditional SOC, and this is actually one of our SOCs. This is one that we've got in Sweden. You'll probably notice there's not a huge amount of staff in there, but I'll come back to the reason for that a little bit later on. So you have your SOC staff, and probably the best example is to get them working alongside pen testers. So use the pen testing staff within your SOC for a week or so to be able to do that knowledge sharing. And also at the same time, get your SOC analysts working alongside penetration testers or red team testers to be able to understand how attackers work. And that piece in the middle is where both teams learn. The penetration testers understand better how the defenders work and what they're looking at, and obviously how to get through those defenses. And from the SOC, it's a much better understanding of how those attacks are going to happen. But it's not just that. It's not just penetration testers that you can work with. It's the actual business itself. If you can get your staff to actually sit in with your business partners, understand what the business itself is doing, then you're going to enable them. You want your staff to feel motivated, to give them a better idea of what it is they're actually defending, and also to give them a better idea of what is normal for the actual environment, what the actual staff they're doing and why they're doing it. And ultimately, the flip side of that is the people that work within the business understands what the SOC does, why they're there, why they are looking to defend the organization, what normal looks like to the SOC, what all these phishing attacks are, and why they have to do their corporate reviews every year with all those training sessions that we all sit through. And it just makes all of that better. Right, so I've been talking about normal and change of visibility. So anything outside the normal, we should be investigating. We've got our baselines. It's not always easy to be able to figure out what a baseline is. It's something, you know, if you're working within an OT environment, which is static, that's a lot easier to be able to baseline. So it's a good idea to work with those various different security teams that you've got within your organizations to understand what normal looks like, and then from there build out your threat hunting strategies afterwards. So next one, threat intelligence. Let's flip that the other way around. So instead of just considering threat intelligence as the feeds that you're bringing into your SOCs and the custom threat intelligence you're building out on based upon the actual attacks that you're seeing, because obviously, you know, that's great. Everything that you're receiving individually it's targeted against yourselves as an organization, so you can build that out as the threat picture against the threat actors to give you a better picture. But flip it the other way, look at the actual business. What is it that the business is looking at from threat intelligence? Build out a dossier against your own internal business units and your senior staff. Understand what they themselves are looking at, what the business is trying to defend, and that will make things a lot easier as well. So what are the crown jewels that you're defending? Whereabouts within your own networks are you the weakest? So everybody is aware of the patching policy, or at least you should be. Not every SOC team talks to the vulnerability staff, or even has visibility of all the patching status of the machines. That's something you want to change. You want to understand within your networks where the vulnerabilities are as well. If you can automate that into your systems so that when an alert comes in, that you are automatically getting told that system A or system B is at a higher level or could be compromised by this attack, all to the better. And then you have to establish, who's got elevated levels of access to the machines. If you're seeing anything unusual coming from those, react to it. And then the final one for this, the change of visibility. Again, this is improving. We have lots of different organizations that are talking to each other now. And most well known here in the UK is obviously CISP. But if you're in the same vertical, please just make sure that you're talking to your peers. If something's hitting your network, please make sure that you're letting your peers know about it. If you would want to know about that, if it happened to somebody else, it means that you are already in a place to be able to defend against that 3 hours down the line when it actually starts hitting your network. Right, we've been talking about Armour. So whereabouts are we going to put our Armour? And in our case, we're talking about tooling and staffing. Very few organizations out there actually have got all the bells and whistles, or the money to be able to afford to have all those bells and whistles and tools to have a perfect network. And even, I mean, we all have seen the likes of Mandiant with the SolarGate attack. One of the most famous teams in the world, and yet they still suffered an attack. So keep in mind that 82% of all the breaches out there would have been stopped with the existing controls that they already had in place. That's something that Verizon picked up on as part of their data breach report earlier this year. So we have to start thinking about not just the blocking side of things, but it's the detection and response side. So we'll take our detection capability, the firewalls, proxies, all of those sort of traditional tool sets, and park those for one moment. We want to start thinking about how we can speed up how we're going to be able to, first of all, detect the threats themselves and then respond to them. And that's probably been one of the biggest changes over the last couple of years, is the actual ability for security teams to be able to reach out and respond to a threat rather than relying solely on the SecOps teams to be able to assist them. We see threat intelligence, sorry, we see artificial intelligence and machine learning is starting to make inroads now. I'll cover this a little bit later on. A lot of those do still rely on known bad, but it's the speed that they're able to pick things up that are making a real difference. Ultimately, where we are going to have the most effectiveness for anything outside of normal known bad is threat hunting. You can do it on almost any platform out there. But it's important that you actually know what it is that you're going to go hunting for in the first place. There's no point in just sitting down in front of a screen and looking for unusual activity or unusual traffic. It's best working out what is important to you. So identifying a sort of mission statement that you're going to follow for that particular threat hunting session. So say DNS tunneling, you work out exactly how DNS tunneling works, and then you map out every way that you're going to look to actually identify how you actually have that within your network. Right, that leads us on to use cases again. I've been talking about use cases for years at various conferences around the world, and they are one of the best tools that you've got in your arsenal, but not when they come out of the tin. You've got to make sure that you can base them solely on what you have within your own environment. And don't just turn everything on. Every single thing, if you turn it on that's in the actual SIEM or whatever whatever tool set you're using, is just going to lead to disaster. You're going to have multiple false positives because it might not be something that's applicable to your environment. Or worst case scenario, and this is one I saw years ago. An organization had implemented a new SIM solution. They also had packet capture incorporated into it as well. And they just turned on every single rule and content that they had in there. And they wondered why the system was completely overloaded and died and just didn't work. So they had to rebuild the entire platform. So, custom use cases. Start with, as a minimum, 10 use cases. Work them against your specific environment. So, use what you know about your estate, where you have your endpoints, where you've got missing patches, and what is important to your business ultimately. So, build out the top 10 threat scenarios that your business is concerned about, and don't stop there. Always keep updating them. Make sure that use cases are up to date. And even better than that, how would you get in yourself? So think about that, or even better, bring in a red team to do it. I don't think I've come across any red team yet that doesn't get into a network in one way or another. And if they can get into a network, the attackers can get in there as well. So think about the Medici side of things again. Work with that red team to be able to build out the use cases that are going to be able to detect those threats that really do matter to you and to your network, because you know that somebody can actually get in there. EDRs and NDRs. So I'll just leave that quote on there from Gartner first of all. This is probably one of the biggest changes that we've seen on the market over the last couple of years, and it's made the whole landscape for incident response completely differently. We're more, as a tradition within incident response, you think about having the team being deployed or boots on the ground, and teams actively working an incident in the client environment. Our incident response team, I think we only work maybe 5–10% of our actual engagements require us to go onto site nowadays. Almost all the work is done remotely via the endpoint detection response teams. And why is that? It's ultimately because it not only gives us the visibility of the threats that's out there, but, and this is the crucial bit, the ability to be able to respond to them as well. So, you know, we have the ability for that rapid analysis piece. It allows us to be able to quarantine individual files or the actual entire system itself. And if we're doing the individual files that are at risk, the user can still actually carry on and do their work. They also have the ability to use policies and watch lists, which you can build out in the same way as you can do with use cases. So things that are specific to your environment. You can still have the ones that come out of the box, and all of that, you can offload that work up into an MSS for you, so that they can do the eyes on glass, the 24/7 security monitoring for you, which frees up your staff's time to be able to do the eyes on glass and do the threat hunting, to proactively look for what matters to you. Yeah, so that's that portion of the deck. The next one, users, behavior analytics, pattern analysis. Again, this is another new tool set that's risen up over the last 3 or 4 years. We as human beings are awesome at picking up things that aren't normal, whether that's the different way that somebody's painted a painting to be able to know what forgery is, from the telemetry between 2 Formula 1 drivers to see where improvements can be made on a racing track, to us within cyber. Our users, for the most part, they've got very standard profiles in the way they interact with their systems. For the most part, as I say, there are obviously exceptions. And UBA is excellent at picking up that. So what are the sort of patterns that we're looking for? Classic one is endpoints. So endpoints, they don't talk to each other. Endpoints talk to ADs and other network servers and things like that. They don't talk to other endpoints, or at least they haven't done for about 30, 40 odd years. So if you're seeing any traffic that follows that kind of pattern, you're almost automatically looking at lateral flow within, or sorry, lateral movement within within your environment. And you don't necessarily have to use all the fancy tools and everything else that's out there. You can dump data out of your SAME, patch it into Excel and start looking for things out of the usual, and use Excel to be able to use your charts and things like that to be able to start giving you patterns for what's happening within your environment. Start coding or using Python. There's tons of things out there that can help with that. Probably the biggest bit of a buzzword bingo that we have out there at the moment. However, you know, that's now on to the second part of the hype curve, and we are actually starting to see some really good uses of AI and machine learning. Mainly where we've got massive bits of data sets to be able to pull the information out of, to be able to give us all that extra information to be able to identify the threats that we've got. So this is one specific example from a tool set that we ourselves utilize in our SOC. And it means that we are able to analyze vast amounts of data separately, which SOC analysts just don't have the visibility of, or for that matter, the capacity to be able to respond to. So the picture we had earlier with the SOC with about 20 odd people in it, ultimately that's because we don't have any level 1 analysts. The machine learning is doing all of that for us now. So it removes that lower level 1 analyst job, saves on head count, and it allows us to focus on the actual real threats when they're coming through. And again, this is our specific example, but there are lots more out there, and I'll cover some of those in a minute as well. So these ones, they're not actually alerts. These are normal logs that are coming up into the system. Depending on what's happening, they're getting scored higher or lower, depending on what the actual alerts are. So in this example, we've got a trigger level of 500. We're seeing policy elements for Tor traffic, which is about halfway down that page, which have got a hit score on there of 50. But higher up, the second one down has got a score of 260. That's the rig exploit kit in our example here. And then when you add up all of these numbers, anything over 500, is going to be bad, and obviously this one set in 1,300. It gives you a lot more visibility and a lot quicker with less of burnout for the actual analysts themselves. So that's, that's using ourselves as an example. But other organizations can use AI to enhance the threat hunting process by integrating the behavioral analysis that they're seeing. So you can leverage AI models to develop profiles for every application within your organization's network. That allows you to process higher volumes of endpoint data and to be able to establish where there's breaks from normal traffic. One thing to bear in mind, though, that it is an arms race. Hackers are also using AI themselves as well. So attackers are going to test and improve their malware just as they've done with antivirus using AI-based security tools. So they learn from the existing AI tools how to develop more advanced attacks and how to attack traditional security systems or even AI boosted systems. So they want to be able to keep advancing their own individual capabilities, which are over and above the standard attacks that we're seeing out there now. So for us as defenders, let's stop thinking about known bad and standard and being able to think of other ways to be able to pick it up. So we're coming to the sort of close for this presentation now. And I just want to reiterate some of the points I've already gone through. So first of all, assume you've already been bad or you've been compromised. Change that mindset and pivot away from the eyes on glass, constantly looking at the waterfall of alerts and the fatigue that comes with that, and empower your analysts by making them talk to other people to understand the business and be able to get them empowered on what they are doing themselves. Look for anything that is outside of the normal. Why is your sysadmin logging in at 2 o'clock in the morning? Something as simple as that. It's, that's bad. It shouldn't be happening, unless, of course, that's normal for your business, and in which case, obviously, you whitelist that, you move on. But again, if you've whitelisted all your admins, I hope you're going through that list and you are making sure that you've reviewed the list as well. That this is all normal traffic for your whitelisted admins to be doing. Be paranoid. Make sure you've got that itch. If you feel that there's something wrong, trust your gut instinct. We as human beings, there's a reason why we're alive today. We trust what our instincts are telling us. If you think there's something that is wrong with your network, or that you aren't seeing what you think you should be seeing, investigate, understand it more. Trust yourselves. Then use the Matisse effect, cross-train within your staff. Everybody's got multiple different teams within their security infrastructure, within your teams. Cross-train them. You will reap the benefits. Trust me. Make sure you're doing red team exercises. As I said, they are going to get into your network. So find out how they did it. They're always going to give you some good results. So make the most of that information. And live with these sort of things in your head. Have I been compromised? What am I missing? What attacks are going to get through that I don't know about? And with that brings me to the end of our little chat. I'll leave these up on the screen, and I guess we're going to hand over to questions anytime now. So thanks for your time, and look forward to talking to you.
Thank you very much, David, for this talk. Now, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to send them across. We have one question at the moment. David, in your opinion, what has been the main changes in the last few years in terms of detection and capabilities? Tell us a little bit more.
I think the biggest change, certainly over the last 4 or 5 years that we've seen out there, is 100% endpoint detection response. So for the ability to have a team anywhere on the planet to be able to go and remotely access a system, investigate it, quarantine it, and remediate it, possibly within minutes, but definitely, you know, that's probably the biggest change that we've seen to date.
Yeah, I agree. As a red teamer, that is normally that's one of the biggest changes as well. Long gone are the days where there was very little visibility on the network. EDRs definitely have changed the landscape, don't you think? 100%.
So obviously, if you're on the red team side, I'm interested to see what your thought is about the Medici effect as well, whether you see that sort of similar benefits of cross-training staff.
Yes, definitely, of course. So yeah, 100%. One thing is the technology, but we've seen many instances where the technology was in place, but the training and the skill set was not there. So therefore, if events are not properly triaged, well, it doesn't matter how much you detect if you are not following things up. So detection is just the first step, and then you definitely need to do all the triage and follow things up, of course, for containing an attack. Exactly.
Yeah.
Very good. One last reminder, if anyone wants to ask any questions, just feel free to use the application, okay? In the meantime, David, is there anything else that you're thinking that you might have been missing from your presentation and you want to add for the rest of us?
I think I did touch on it a little bit. I think after the first year or two of the career of doing intrusion detection and actually started doing malware analysis, I think that's where I really got the change in perspective. When you actually really see what's out there, rather than just, you know, eyes on glass all the time, that when you can see just how advanced the attackers are, why should we not be thinking that there's somebody already in there? Because I always had that itch, you know, it was like, are we supposed to be finding this stuff so that I'm not looking over at the other side? You know, it's like what attackers do with DDoS. They do DDoS to be able to get their other attack coming in low and slow on the other side. So it's I think having a paranoid approach to security is going to put anybody in a good stead.
Definitely. Rule number 1: never underestimate your attacker.
Yeah.
Exactly. They are extremely talented and they do this for a living, the same as us. You know, this is what it is. Very good. It seems that we don't have any more questions, and I think we are back on the schedule. So let me say once more, thank you very much, David, for your contribution and your presentation. It was really interesting. We're going to do a break for lunch, and we will reconvene just before 1:30. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you. Cheers.